Let's talk about what's happening in Venezuela and beyond. Right now, joining us is Democratic Senator Coons of Delaware, who sits on the Foreign Relations Committee. Senator, thank you so much for coming in. We were talking, there's a lot of focus this morning on what's going to happen at the White House with the Venezuelan opposition leader, Maria Corina Machado, going to the White House to have lunch with President Trump. That's happening there, while in Congress, you just had the War Powers Resolution fail. It had sought to force President Trump to seek congressional approval for any further U.S. military action in Venezuela. That failed because of lobbying from the White House on Republican senators. Josh Hawley said that he got assurances there would be no ground troops sent to Venezuela, and if they wanted that to change, they would seek congressional approval. You clearly do not trust that assurance, but what do you do now then?
Well, Kate, I don't trust that assurance because it's now known publicly that the Trump administration was preparing and training our military for the mission to go into Venezuela to kidnap and return to the United States President Maduro of Venezuela. There were 100 Venezuelans killed in this very successful mission that our military carried out well. But on a policy basis, they lied to us in Congress. We had briefings several times where they insisted that they were taking strikes against drug trafficking boats in the Southern Caribbean, and they were not contemplating regime change. So if my colleague, Senator Hawley, got a reassurance that he believes, I think he should just look at the record of the last few months. The Trump administration has said, well, we can't share things like this with our Congress. The Constitution requires it. The president does have the power to protect us from an imminent threat if missiles are launched at the United States or there was a renewed surprise attack like Pearl Harbor. But this was something they planned for months, and they should have consulted Congress. Trump's threatening all sorts of actions now. He's threatening action against Mexico, Colombia, Cuba, Greenland. I think this was a missed opportunity for my Republican colleagues to stand up to President Trump and say, Congress has a role. You cannot ignore us.
Well, in terms of, I mean, this is all connected somewhat, also in terms of trusting someone's word. The president seems to have pushed off military action against Iran for now. He had set a red line first at he'd go in with military action if protesters were being killed. Then he said he'd take action if protesters were executed. Possibly a distinction without a difference for those on the ground who have had their loved ones murdered. Do you think the president, when it comes to Iran, has set red lines and already blown through them?
Yes, and I think it's important for a great nation like the United States to not bluff. Part of what is causing such chaos in our relationships in NATO is his repeated assertion that we're going to take Greenland the easy way or the hard way. That is undermining the strength and the stability of the NATO alliance. Saying to the protesters in Iran, we will take action and strike the regime in Iran if they kill protesters, and then they kill thousands of protesters, and he changes it to if they execute protesters. Now, in a positive development, the mullahs, the clerical regime in Iran has delayed the execution of a protester, but thousands have already been killed. I think one of the things that is really causing huge challenges for us is our president's lack of focus on what Americans care about, costs in healthcare, in housing, in groceries, and instead he's picking a different country every week to threaten to attack or to focus on. The Department of Justice still hasn't released more than 1% of the Epstein files. President Trump is not focused on solving the war between Russia and Ukraine. In fact, he's blaming the victim, Ukraine, and instead he's gone on this wild ride around the world, threatening to attack and actually attacking quite a few countries. Under President Trump, the United States took military action against 7 countries last year. He claims he has solved 8 wars. I think he's working hard to start new ones.
I need to try to fit in 2 more things. And on that point, let's stay focused on it. I want to stay focused on Iran. Lindsey Graham said that he wants to see Trump attack Iran sooner rather than later. The way he put it, when Trump said that help is on the way, Lindsey Graham said that an attack on the regime is the only help that really matters. Do you think U.S. military action is warranted and will help protesters?
Look, I don't think it will help protesters. I think what we should do in the meantime is to help make sure that the protesters in Iran have access to the internet, something we have been able to do in the past. We should consult with our regional partners about how we can support a movement towards democracy in Iran. But our regional allies and partners are urging us not to carry out a military strike. They think that will simply strengthen the regime, not weaken it.
Now shifting focus to Greenland, you are leading a bipartisan group of lawmakers
Yes.
to the island in the next couple days. What are you going to do there? Especially after you have three governments just left that meeting at the White House yesterday saying that there are still fundamental disagreements on the we're going to take Greenland sooner one way or another coming from President Trump.
Well, to be clear, Kate, a bipartisan group of us are going to Denmark, and we will be meeting with senior leaders from the Danish and Greenlandic governments, as well as parliamentarians, civil society leaders, business leaders. This is a large delegation of 10 members, House and Senate, and our goal is to just thank the Danes for having been good and solid and reliable NATO partners and allies, to have a respectful conversation about how we can jointly and constructively address Arctic security concerns, how we might be partners in sustainably developing Greenland's resources, but bluntly also to assert that we don't think threats against a trusted NATO ally are constructive or necessary.
Senator Chris Coons, thanks for coming in, Senator. Sarah?